Good evening, everyone. Come on in. Come on in tonight. I've just landed in Australia and I have the wonderful, incomparable, remarkable Wendy Burns with us. So you all come on in. Let me know you're here. Tell us your name, where you're from. Uh, I know most of you have been tuning in every week and as we've been going around the world. Wendy, we started in the United States.
Yeah.
We have been to Barbados. We have been to Nigeria, to Kenya, to
Wow.
Malaysia. And now we're in Australia. And next week we'll be in Guatemala.
How
And
wonderful.
then we will come back to the United States. So I am
Oh, how
so
wonderful.
excited about this. I'm so excited. So Wendy, say hello to everyone tonight.
Firstly, hello, Barbara, and welcome to Australia on our 9th of September. So we're one day ahead of you, so it's
That's
early
right.
morning for us. So welcome to Australia.
Thank you. And everyone, I want you all to know that today in Australia is Wendy's birthday. I didn't know that when I invited her, but today's her birthday. Now in the United States, it's the 8th, but in Australia, it's the 9th. And so today is actually her birthday. So happy birthday, Wendy.
Thank you. What a way to celebrate.
Well, thank you for being here on your birthday. Hi, Debbie. Hi, Ronaldo. Hi, Dwan. Come on in. Come on in. It's so good to see you. You all are in for a treat. We have had some wonderful women to come in that we've been visiting from around the world. And tonight we have Wendy Burns. And all the people are saying happy birthday, Wendy.
Thank you.
We're gonna jump in because I met Wendy through a teaching team that we were part of, and the John Maxwell team. And but to get to meet her and to meet you, Wendy, is just wonderful because my impression of you when I met you, and still is, you're such a class act, warm and kind, intelligent, and I always admired you. I always admired you, but really admire you as I've gotten to know you and gotten to know your spirit. And tonight, everyone, I just want you all to lean in. Hi, Debbie. Hi, Jerry. I want you to lean in because we are talking to women who are leading around the world, and that includes Wendy. But we're going to start off tonight because Wendy has a remarkable story. First of all, Wendy, I want you to lift your book up because we're only going to, yep, there you go. It's called Remarkable You, A Journey to Discovery, Hope Within. And you're going to understand tonight why Wendy is so remarkable. And the most important thing to me is the hope that it gives to other people, which I know was her impetus for writing this book. So Wendy, tell us, we always start out by telling us about you, about your background, how you grew up. Just take us in, tell us.
Well, where do I start? It's a big story. So I'm going to start in my childhood because really that's where my story began, and for all of us. And I was thinking into this yesterday, Barbara, after you sent me the questions, and I thought, well, as children, we just think our childhood is normal. It does not matter how dysfunctional our childhood is. So I grew up in a little country town called Uralla in a state called New South Wales here in Australia. I now live in the wonderful Queensland, but I'm soon to move. And I grew up in this little country town where everybody knew everything. It was a typical Australian country town, different classes of people. And we were probably classed at the very bottom of the class of people, very poor, incredibly dysfunctional. But as a child, I did not know that was how I was until somebody told me, right? So my family, I have 3 sisters. And I had 2 brothers, one that died at birth. My parents were alcoholics, as long as I can remember back as a little girl. My parents were alcoholics. Not that I knew what that meant then. I had no idea what that was. So that gives you a sense of the bit of the dysfunctionality that we lived in. My father was a gardener, a market gardener. He used to grow the most incredible vegetables in his garden, and he would sell them. And I would follow him around. I was what you would call here in Australia a tomboy. I was more of a boy than a girl as a little girl. I adored my father. absolutely adored him. He was, I felt like I was the apple of his eye, but every child in a family thinks they're the apple of the eye of their parent. I followed him around. I didn't realize then about the dysfunctionality that was going on. We would go fishing together. He would go shooting rabbits to eat. We used to catch our food. Yes, I'm talking about, this is not normal in Australia, right? But we used to catch our food. Until I found out that I actually wasn't so normal. Catching a bus to school one day, we used to walk through the snow sometimes to get a bus to go to a school in a town called Armidale. And I can remember on the bus, it was when something changed for me, when a child on the bus told me that I was dirty. And up until then, I was just a child. I was very, very innocent in the fact that I didn't understand that I was different. I knew I was different, but I didn't understand the difference in that. My life was perhaps worse than some, but not as worse as others' lives. My parents, as I said, were alcoholics. And the biggest issue for me as a child, I guess, was that my father committed suicide. Not only did he commit suicide, he implicated me in that suicide. He got me to help him with his suicide. So I was a 13-year-old girl. So that was such a impacting moment in my childhood. Sure, we had fun times. We grew up with not much. We didn't have much food except when my parents caught or picked. They used to pick fruit as well. But until that moment, it was just, life just went on. The times that they would get so drunk that they would pass out, and we would try and survive as children. I'm the second eldest. So as the eldest in the family, or the second eldest, you take responsibility even for your parents at that age. The day that my father took his own life, as I said, I was 13, and we were supposed to go away in the car. He had a little car for the day, and we didn't because it was snowing. And so instead they went to the hotel and were drinking. When we came home, he went and lied on my bed, and he asked me to hand him his gun, and he told me that this is how you kill yourself, and he killed himself in front of me. So as a 13-year-old girl, that was when I realized life was not what I thought it was.
Wow, Wendy. That is so traumatic. I can't even imagine at 13 years old. And the book that you've written, and we're going to talk a lot about it later, called Remarkable You. And I wanted you to explain that trauma and kind of growing up, because there are so many people, that look at you now. You're leading. I mean, you are a thought leader, wonderful woman of God. And so I really want to tap into, because I think that the human spirit is so resilient, especially when we have God.
Oh, absolutely. And that's a whole story for me. And I didn't find God until I was 34. And I just want to go back to something you said about the trauma and the impact. And I've been thinking a lot about this because I've been invited to do another podcast on what fathers need to know. And I was thinking about the impact of parents on their children and the choices that parents make that affect the generations, their children and the generations to come behind them. For me, as that 13-year-old, and I just want to add one more thing that added to my trauma that day. The day that my father committed suicide, my uncle sexually assaulted me that night, simply because he could. And so impact upon impact. So the people that are supposed to love you and care for you and support you actually damage you and cause you incredible trauma. And that trauma can just continue to travel with you until you deal with it. Absolutely. Right? It's like this hound that comes behind you. And I talk a lot about that in my book, the things that come with that: shame, humiliation, all of those things. That was when I was 13. When I was 17, my mother took her own life on my birthday. So it's just this impact of this suicidal inheritance that was a generational inheritance that I actually was born into, and I inherited it till I was 34. Right.
All right. That is so good. I love the way you set the tone for that, Wendy, because you mentioned, because a lot of times, like you said, there is trauma, there are things in our family we don't recognize. I mean, we don't we know the world as it is within our own home until we see something different, and then we say, oh, okay, there's something different. Um, but you went through and you outlined this very well in your book. And one of the things that I love about your book is that your book goes through each chapter, but it also gives these questions and thoughts and calls to action after each chapter. And so that is what to me distinguishes your book and makes it so powerful. So I really want to say to the people on tonight, I want you, and I don't say this often, I want you to buy this book, and not only buy one copy, buy several copies, because especially if you're in ministry, this book, it has the power that comes through it, has the power to change a person's life. Because I believe that it beautifully introduces them to even this place where you're in your 30s, Wendy. And what
Yes.
happened in your 30s? Where were you? Tell us the context of what you were thinking, where you were, and tell us what happened.
Well, I had this hidden baggage. And I just want to say, I want to be specific. It's there for men and women, but I think even for women, we carry baggage more. So I went on through my life. I married once, I married twice, hidden baggage, getting more and more and more, shame, guilt, humiliation, all of those things were compounding. I realized that I had some capacity within me, that I actually was really good with people. And I secured a job in government, and I was working in government in quite a senior role. Miracle without an education, right? Knowing my background, and you read my story, that was not possible. And when I was 34, I was leading quite a successful legal department, a prosecution department here in the state of Queensland. And I had some false allegations against me put to our Crime and Misconduct Commission. So it's the biggest, it's like the biggest authority that oversees police and government officials, saying that I had done, 330 things that I'd done, really, when I found out the charges. But I didn't know at the time. I'd been stood down from my job. I'd been marched out of the building. I'd been told I'd been accused of blackmailing people, etc., etc. Let me just come back for a moment. The thing that I love that was important to me was my integrity. Even till that point, even though I didn't know my values fully, we still have values within us. And I had realized as I journeyed through life, even though I was still contemplating suicide in the background, my integrity was important. But I thought my job was what made me who I was. We wear labels, don't we? We label ourselves. So I was a senior business manager in this state government department, and I was important. I oversaw these big legal prosecutions. So I was important, right? By the world standards.
That's right.
I was marched out. It was the day in Queensland. We had a red dust storm, very rare. It's on Wikipedia. That's how rare it is. Outside, it was just red dust everywhere. It was dark. It was dismal. It was the day after I'd been stood down. My husband went to work and left me at home. And that's all through my life until I was 34. When things got bad, I contemplated suicide because my parents had told me that's what you do. Things go wrong, you can't cope, you take your own life. And so that day I thought, well, I've lost my job. I've lost who I am. It's time for me to go. And I seriously contemplated suicide. Now, let me just add in here, and that's why this is important for people in ministry. I already had accepted Jesus in my life as my Lord and Savior, right? I'd already accepted him. So that was when I was 34. I made that first good choice. But I still had this suicidal stuff still in here, this generational inheritance. So I just want to give that clarity there. I was sitting within a church community, but you don't share that shame. You still wear a mask and pretend you're something that you're not. But that day, I just thought, enough is enough. I'm going. And I got on my knees, and I really cried out to God that if you're real, if I reached out in faith. And he took my hand that day because I was contemplating taking my life. And instead, Jesus took my hand. And it was like I was on my floor. I was literally on my floor in my lounge room. Everything changed in that moment. I was a Christian I was a churchgoer.
Make the distinction now.
Yeah, I was a churchgoer. That moment on my lounge room floor, I started a relationship with my Lord. So I became a follower of Jesus that day. Why? Because he reached out to me in that moment when I had nothing to live for. My label, who I was, that made me important, that made me who I was being stripped away. But I love how God uses everything in our lives. And he takes us to the very moment where we get to choose. Life is full of choices. And that's why I have a reflection section in my book. I had to make a choice that day. And I chose Jesus, right? Simple as that. It was so simple. Sure, I still had to walk through the investigation, but everything changed. It pivoted in that moment. Everything changed for me. I walked through the investigation. Of course, I was found innocent. It took 9 months, but I was found innocent. Absolutely. But God gave me a word. He told me that they would set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. And what they did put on a beautiful morning tea in this government department to announce my innocence in front of the people that had made the allegations. And it was just like, God, you make me smile when we truly want to walk in relationship. So for that 9 months, I just learned about this incredible relationship with this father that wasn't going to cause me pain, because we carry the baggage from our fathers, that, the damage from all the people, the men in my life that had hurt me, that I could actually trust this heavenly father. And that was, even though at 34 I made a choice to accept Jesus, I accepted a church religion. I didn't accept a relationship. And so that was a change for me.
All right.
Long story, sorry.
No. You because you really have mentioned a few things, Wendy, and I think that I know it is extremely important. One, when you said, I had accepted Christ. Okay, I was a churchgoer. So a lot of times it's not that we meet Jesus so for some people it's on the altar. It's in the church, even though we're going to church. But you met him that day at your lowest point.
Yes.
On the floor. And I remember reading in your book, Wendy, you describing this darkness that had been over you. And I remember you describing reaching your hand out, literally reaching your hand out, and this darkness disappearing.
Absolutely. And
the other thing I want to say is that not only you talked about disappearing, but there was something that you said that was extremely important. You said, I still had work to do after that. And you just said that a few minutes ago. And I think for us, especially for people in ministry, it's important to understand that. Okay? So the miraculous came. He entered in because he was going to make sure, Wendy, that you were going to live out your purpose.
Absolutely.
And then you had this work to do. And so the story, I just want to say the story is absolutely remarkable. I mean, Wendy has given us the highlights of it, but you just really have to read, because I think, Wendy, what it does also, it gives us compassion for people, no matter what color you are, no matter what background you are, no matter what gender you are, no matter what your culture is. It gives us compassion for people in a lot, understanding that children, especially children, because, we can be really mean and we can be mean to people.
Yes.
Not knowing their story. Because, Wendy, everybody has a story.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Not knowing, so people could have looked at you from the outside and said, what's going on with her? And have no idea of your story. Let me ask you this. What would you say to people who might have encountered you while you were on your journey? Being in this place now and looking back, what would you say to people on how to interact, how to encourage, how to handle the you that they would have met in those days?
Yeah, to look deeper than the surface. And I think we look at the surface of somebody and we make a judgment. We are so quick to judge others. And we just assume, with the assumption is the enemy, we know. So to look deeper and to listen hard, because if you listen to what's not being said, you can actually find out what's going on, and you get a sense. And particularly when you do truly become a follower of Jesus, we have this extra gift of the Holy Spirit that just gives us that, okay, let me ask a different question here. And so, yes, those people that journeyed with me up until then didn't look deep. But we wear a mask, and as women, we wear it well. We can be a mess. We can get out of our car and go into a corporate job, and we can come back to our car and be a mess.
Yes, we can. And we wear it well. We dress it up. We put makeup on it. We do all kinds of things, fix out the hair up. And you're absolutely
Yep.
right. And come back. And we just keep going. We keep going and going and
Yeah.
going. And before we move on, I remember there was a woman that came up to you in church one day. And this was significant later on in your remembrance of knowing this woman didn't know anything about you, but she said something to you that was very important, that became very important in terms of your father. And you said she didn't know me. I'd never met the woman, you know.
Oh, yes, 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 absolutely. That was when I first made a commitment. That was actually absolute truth. When I first made that commitment to Jesus, this woman said that God knew the guilt I'd carried over my father's death. And nobody knew that. I didn't share that with anybody. There was no sense of how could that be? How could this Heavenly Father that they're telling me about know what's in my heart or the guilt I'd carried? Because I didn't share with people that I was part of his suicide. One, you move on in life as a child, you go through the inquest, you do all of those things, but you don't share that. That's not something you freely share. So that was really quite significant. Still didn't cause me to have a relationship because I was still really wary of this person.
Absolutely. So to hear that story, Wendy, and to see, I mean, you're a woman that leading now. You lead very well. You have a family. In fact, you're getting ready to move.
We
Um,
are.
you're going to be in Australia, but you're moving to a different part of Australia. I understand.
Yes, we're moving to Darwin. So I'm announcing that now to the world. We're moving to the top end of Australia.
Wow, that's awesome. And so you'll be closer to family. Well, you have
We'll
family
have
here, but you'll be
we have family here, but there's family there too.
yeah.
Yeah.
So now they have to share you. I say they have to share you, Wendy. So that's
Yes.
wonderful. So tell us, because a lot of people have a issue or issues with moving from that traumatic place in their life, even after they meet God, to the place where you are now. Tell us about Australia itself, and tell us about women leading in Australia and how you're leading. What are you doing now?
Sure. Australia itself, we're a beautiful place. You must come and visit
Oh,
if
I
we
know.
ever open up our borders and let people in from overseas
Oh,
again. I know COVID has just made everything different. But, let's put that aside for a moment. Let's not mention the elephant in the room. Australia is a beautiful place to live. And we have some incredible leaders here in Australia. And I think when a crisis is on, we see what's inside of our leaders. And what's inside rises to the top. It's like milk rises to the top of cream rises to the top of the milk. And we've got an incredible here in Queensland. And without getting political, because I don't want to go political, but we have an amazing woman, Premier, Anastasia Palaszczuk. And what I admire about this woman leader is that no matter what political stuff is going on, she stood true to her values. And our friend John Maxwell says, you ask for a heart before you ask for a hand. She looks for the heart of the people of Queensland, and she cares for the people of Queensland. And so we're seeing that now come out in this crisis. So we have some incredible women leaders. We do, our Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, a Christian, got into as Prime Minister. They said he would never make it, but our God is a miracle working God, right?
Absolutely.
And to be able to stand on the podium the night he was elected to say this is a miracle, and to see him lead Australia through this crisis has been amazing. Not everybody likes everybody, but I trust our leaders, and as a Christian, we have an obligation to pray for them.
Absolutely.
But about Australia is about mateship. We care about each other, and when there's a crisis on, bushfires, floods, even, you know, through the elephant in the room we're not talking about, we see people raise up and support. And that's the one thing I love about Australia is we'll step in. When somebody's down, the majority of the time we'll step in and help. Of course, you get the majority that won't, but that's what Australia is all about. And we don't have kangaroos jumping down the street and koalas in my garden. I would like them, but we don't. We have beautiful birds.
Oh, that is wonderful. I mean, because you had a really rough year. I mean, aside from COVID, you had a rough year with fires and a number of other things in Australia. And but it is a beautiful, beautiful place. Is on my bucket list for sure. So as soon as COVID's over, I'm coming to Australia. But I love what you were saying about how women and prime ministers leading in Australia in terms of caring, because research
Yes.
has really shown that women bring this caring factor as leaders to the table,
Yeah.
something that probably Wendy 10 years ago would not have been welcomed. But I think seeing it now in action has made a big difference.
Yes, and I agree with you. And still today, I'm not sure it's 100% welcome, but it is more acceptable. And particularly here in Queensland, we have a female state premier, and our chief health officer, Dr. Jeanette Young, is another lady that I really admire. And she's been leading the health side for Queensland. And I've seen the care of this woman. No matter what's going on politically around her, it's about the care for the people and the heart for the people. And she's very overt with that. And I love that. And, as we start as leaders, whether we're leading a family, and after all, we're all leaders in some form, right? Self-leadership is what everything I do is about self-leadership. To change anything, to change a nation is about self-leadership. And we know that transformational leadership values. But to see that happening for us here in Australia right now in Queensland with our leadership, not wanting to play political games, just wanting to care for the people, not giving in against what they believe. And I love to see that, and as women, we can be strong leaders. We can have that balance of care and love, but still make hard decisions as leaders.
Absolutely, Wendy. Talk about that, because I think that sometimes people think in order to be caring, if you're a caring person, that it's difficult for you to make hard decisions, or it's possible you make hard decisions. But, I don't believe that's true. I think you can be very loving and caring and still make the necessary decisions as a leader. Tell us about that in your own experience leading.
Sure. Look, if I could go back now and lead my last government department with what I know now, 8 years on, I'm sure I'd lead it in a different way as well, because we learn as we grow, don't we? We learn to know as we go. And I love that. We have to balance up the facts. It's about balancing up the facts of what's going on so we get good outcomes, but also the balance of the care for the people at the same time. So sometimes we have to make the hard decisions, and we have to lay people off, or we have to performance manage people, but we do that in a balanced way. So, we show that we care, but the decision still stays the same, doesn't it? If you're not performing, sure, I care about the fact that you're not performing, and let me help you, let me give you some support. But at the end of the day, this is what we're going to do. So it is about really having a balance, whether you're male, female, it doesn't matter. It's about the balance in leadership. When we come in with that dictatorial or that positional leadership, I own this job, this is my authority, this is my label, then you will obey me. That doesn't serve anybody well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, I always say, Wendy, if you have to tell someone you're the boss, you're really not.
Exactly. Exactly.
You're the leader, you're really, really not. And to lead people, so what do you think in terms of your leadership it takes? You talked about the caring and the ability to make tough decisions. But what does it take, in your estimation, for us as we look at leading well into the future? What is it going to take for us to lead really well?
I think really we have to, and we heard this recently, we have to go back to the basis of our leadership and look at our values. And I think knowing who we are is important, not the label, but who we are, the values of who we are. And that to be able to lead somebody else, it starts with leading ourselves well. So that I love that law of the mirror. People do what people see. Sorry, the law of the picture. So presenting yourself as a leader who is able to do the right thing and make the right choices for themselves actually helps you lead others, because you lead by example. And I think that's really a requirement in our leadership today. And we need to be able to pivot really quickly. We need to be able to make the shifts that are required in this day and age. Like, we're still in the midst of change. We don't know where this is going to go, and we don't know the outcome. So, and that's why the importance of caring for our staff, for our families, whoever we're leading, our church communities, it's so imperative at this time. People are struggling. We're in a recession here in Australia. People are struggling financially in their homes, in churches, because we haven't been able to meet. So as we lead, we have to think of all of these different things and take all of those things into consideration. But in amongst it, we have to look after ourselves well, because we can't give out of what we don't have.
Ooh, can't give out of an empty bucket, can you, Wendy?
No, and I guess that's been one of my great learnings out of this lockdown time, is because you're on the go, Barbara, you're the same. We are busy, back to back to back. And one of the things that I've really learned is about caring for me, having empathy for me. And I think as a leader, we say there's no room for us as a leader, and there isn't as we lead. It's about the big picture in the team. But in that as well, we still have to have care for ourselves. We have to show empathy for ourselves and have that time of reflection, that time to pause, the time to refresh, so that we can give out more.
Wow. We had some friends that, fly. And, I always think, my husband used to say, Barbara, remember when the kids were little, he said, remember, they said, if something happens, put on your mask first, because he knew I'd probably instinctively put on the kids' mask first.
Yes.
So as a leader, really putting your own mask on, dealing with your own issues, seeing where you can be better, where you need to improve as a leader so that you can help lead other people. In your estimation, leaders today, do they need to be perfect? Are people looking for perfection in their leaders?
I don't believe so. I think they just want honest leaders. They want real leaders. Being real is so important. Very much. Perfection, none of us are perfect. And I think that knowing that none of us are perfect, the old Wendy that had this label of who she was, I had to be perfect. I learned a lot on that floor in that lounge room that day. Knowing that we don't have to be perfect, and to be able to reflect on where we need to improve, what's working well, what do we need to do differently. So as a leader, whether, again, you're leading in an organization, your home, your church, your community, taking the time to pause, taking the time to reflect every single day. I was doing a CEO's growth group, and we talked about the power of reflecting and the power of pausing on the last table that I did, a round table I do with them. Even as a CEO, even more so, you've got all of these competing priorities. Where do you pause? Where do you reflect? Where do you take time to think about, well, am I in a space to make a good decision? Am I looking after myself health-wise, nutritional-wise, rest-wise, all of those things. So much to take into consideration.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because if we don't, we end up pouring out on people.
Yes.
Anger and venom, and our attitudes are not right. You talk a lot about attitude in your book.
My favorite.
About attitude in your book. What role does attitude play, Wendy? Because I noticed you say, oh, my attitude. I had to, you had to bring that into subjection and to the spirit. So.
Oh, very much. Attitude is such a big deal maker or deal breaker. I teach a lot about attitude, because attitude is everything. And you know it yourself. Like when I used to have a really stinky, smelly attitude until that lounge room floor day. Like, you think the world owes you. The world owes me. They should, or if you're in a leader's position, I'm the boss. They have to do it, right? That's my attitude. But attitude, people can smell your attitude even before you open your mouth. It comes out of your skin like garlic. It just leaks out of you. So attitude for me was such a big game changer. And my attitude to myself, because quite often, we can put on a mask, we're out there and we've got it all together. But our attitude to ourselves or our attitude to those closest to us is really important. So, checking your attitude. And if you're reflecting and you're taking time to pause, then you think, well, how was my attitude today? Where do I need to fine tune that? Because it's such a pivotal thing every day before the crisis that we're currently in. But I think even more so now.
Wow. Wow. So, Wendy, tell us, what are you doing? What are you doing work-wise? Where you leading? I know that you consult. You have your own consulting business. And so, what type of people or organizations do you work with? And where do you help them?
I work with some big international organisations and some really small organisations. I work a lot with women. I run a lot of women's groups to be able to help them live their life with no limits. So what my passion is to work with particularly women, so that I empower their voice, so that their voice matters. So letting them find the voice so that they know it's important. I have two streams in my business. I have a leadership with organisations where we do change, leadership growth. I work with top leaders, coaching them in their areas of growth. But working with women is where my heart is and the call on my life. Because I've worked with copious amounts of women to see that they can have no limits, that they actually can live the dream they've buried in the bottom drawer, thinking that that's not for them. That was just, a figment of their imagination, helping them achieve that. And also helping women that are in top leadership roles that do wear that mask every day, but then they're going home and they're not okay. So helping them work that through. So they're the areas that I work in. I speak a lot. I have seems I'm having a regular spot on one of our Christian national vision radio stations.
Oh, wow.
They inviting me back on a regular spot, which is great. And they talk about my book and about life. And
has that started already?
I've been doing, I think I'm up to my 5th or 6th interview coming up in October.
Oh, wow. I'm telling you, the book is having and is going to continue to have such an impact on people. One, because you are just so authentic. And even in the very painful places, you are very authentic in the book. The book is very, you write really well, so it allows you to take pictures and to really put yourself or to be in that place and place of compassion. But the thing I love is to cause you to think about your own life. Because after you talk about, you go through each chapter, you then pull the reader in and you kind of settle them after each chapter. And then what do? What was your goal there? What was your goal after each chapter?
Well, anybody that's worked with me or heard me preach or speak, I always have a call to action, because nothing will change unless we take action. And why do I say that? Because I know I had to take action for me to change. Nothing changes unless we move. And I know that God works with moving vehicles. So for me, it was really important. I kept the chapters small, very small chapters, because I know they are emotional and sometimes they're hard and people have to put it down and then pick it back up. But at the end of each chapter, I want the reader to be able to reflect. Where are they right now in this? Right now, this minute, where do they sit? What is an action that they can take to move forward? Because I want them to be able to lose the baggage, the bogus stories, deal with those things that just hold us back. So that was so important for me to have the call to action.
I love it. That's probably why I love it, because I love call to actions, and I believe in blogs or whatever you're doing, do a call to action. And so what would you say to people, Wendy, who are working with, whether they're in ministry or in jobs, but I'm thinking particularly right now about ministry. When you're working with people who have experienced trauma, they've experienced, some pretty significant trauma in their life. What would you say? Things that you've seen. I mean, you've seen other leaders work with people. You've seen ministry, churches. You've seen organizations. What are some of the things that you see that kind of make you cringe, and you think that probably should be done a different way?
Wow, that's a good question, because we've all heard it, haven't we? You just need to get over it, right? You just got to get over it and move on.
Yes.
Well, that's not the best thing to be saying, because sometimes we can't get over it. And when somebody says that to you, whether it's someone that's praying for you or someone that's ministering to you or counseling you in that form, it's not that easy to get over it, because what you do when you say that to somebody, they actually just hide it a little bit further deep within their heart. What we need to be doing is helping them understand that we can stay in that historian place. And I love that, historian, journalist, futurist. That is important, and I talk about that in my book.
Yeah.
We can so get caught up in the history of our trauma that we stay there. So helping the person that you're working with to see that they can move from that place gently, that their past does not define them. My past defined me for way too long, but your past does not define you. And when we stay over there, we're looking back and we trip over because we can't go forward. But even worse, when we get into this journalist mode where we're reporting on how bad our past was, how life owes me. And I said to you, I felt like life owed me everything. So I sat in that place for a long time. So helping those you work with to see that there's more ahead, that's there, but look in the rearview mirror at it. Just look at it. Yep, I can see that was there. So how can I use that now to take me forward? I love being able to do that with people, to be able to say, okay, use that as a catalyst. Barbara, I wouldn't change what happened to me. As dramatic and as horrible and as traumatic as my life has been in so many different areas, I wouldn't change it.
Now, wait a minute. You are like the second person. Someone said this weekend. Debbie, I hear you. And they said the exact same thing. They said the exact same thing, Wendy, that as horrible as it may sound, and it was, I wouldn't have changed it. Tell us why. Because I think this is really significant for people who are trying to move from, like I said, that past. Yes, that's the history. That's there. But why is that so important? And why do you say that?
Wow, number one, like it's a rich tapestry behind my life. I would not have a voice if I hadn't have been through what I went through and seen, witnessed the horrors of suicide as a child and sexual abuse and all the other traumatic things that you see in my book. I wouldn't have this voice to impact women, or this voice to impact men, or this voice to impact society. We get to speak out of those testimonies. We can choose to let that testimony take us down. And mine was, right? Because I was allowing the shame and the guilt and the horror and all of those things, the lack of self-worth, to help me to pin my who I was onto a label or onto who somebody else was, trying to be like them, until I realized that actually my past gave me almost like a springboard to be who I am. I believe I've been called to be a woman of influence.
Oh, you definitely have.
And I don't say that lightly. I know who I am and I know whose I am. And it's taken me a long time to be able to say that. And probably, it's significant that it was 12 months yesterday to the launch of my book. And putting my life out there into the world was a bit of a shock. We do it, we write it, I wrote it from my heart. But it's taken me 12 months to even process that and really be very clear about the call I have on my life.
Wow.
But if I had not have been through what I'd been through, then there would be no impact. That I wouldn't be able to reach the young girl that's suffering from anorexia. And there's a lady that I work with that, she's a young girl and she's got trauma that she's suffering with. Some of the women that have a mask and a great CEO in an organization, but home, they're hitting the bottle because they don't have an answer.
Wow.
They're trying to be somebody else.
Wow.
So our past can be our catalyst for what we're called, call we have on our life.
Someone said, Wendy, tell us the why. I guess tell us your why.
Well, there's my why. My why is to make a difference, to give women a voice, to let them know their voice matters. We see it in society, and I think we've seen it over this last 7 or 8 months, dare I say, with that COVID thing we're not mentioning. We've seen more domestic violence. We've seen more violence against women. We've seen terrible things happening here, and we've seen, and I'm only talking about Australia, we're seeing race riots everywhere. We're seeing so much happening, and it's time for the voice. It's time for our voice to make a difference. And our past helps us have a voice. It gives us credence and credibility for our voice.
It gives context to our lives, Wendy.
It gives you the authority to speak into
Yes,
that subject.
yes. Because I know when you came on today, I said, Wendy, I want people to know the trauma because they need to know the authority by which you speak in terms of your experience, but also as a woman of God. And
Yeah.
He's given you this voice. You know, when we think about, I think all the time about Wendy, about Jeremiah 1:5, when he talks about, I knew you before you were in your mother's womb. And
Yeah.
even at that time, Wendy, that's so powerful that he said to Jeremiah, I sanctified and ordained you as a prophet to the nations. So there's
Yeah.
something that he has prepared us for, that we were born for, that we were purposed for, and it's
Yes.
for us to discover what that is. And a
Yeah.
lot of times we have the opportunity to discover in our pain, but you've got to process the pain.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What would you say about that, Wendy, about processing the pain?
And that's a great question, because I think that's something I really wouldn't want to overlook. In processing the pain, I'm going to talk about that word forgiveness. We can't process the pain of our past and the hurt and the damage without talking about the fact that we need to learn the power of forgiveness. That was so significant for me to be able to, and it's a continual thing, let me say, is that to forgive those that hurt me, but to forgive myself. We can go through the Christian forgiveness, right? We do it. But then we actually have to walk it out. We have to forgive ourselves for our role in a situation, for, you know, the guilt we carry, you know, that I set my, you know, I blame myself that my uncle sexually abused me. Like, my father had just killed himself. How was I to know that that's what he was about to do? I carried the guilt of my father's death for so long. Once I learned the power of forgiveness, forgiving him and forgiving me, you know, me forgiving me for my role, certainly has been such a significant thing as you process that trauma. And it's an ongoing thing. You know, sometimes something will come back and you think, okay, I thought I dealt with that, so I need to go and sit with God on that. And I need to process and work that through. So, you know, particularly when I wrote my book, my goodness, it was, you know, it was so easy to write my story. I have to say that, because I've got to share my story all over the world, you know, Ukraine, Japan, places I've traveled and shared my story. Lots of things people don't know about me. But then writing it, I had to be sure that I'd processed it. And still, even then, when it went to be published, I only had one comment. And it was someone that is very close to me and loves me, I know, but said to me, after reading your story, we still love you. And I thought, silly comment, because, you know, we say things, don't we, that if I hadn't have dealt with my past or been okay about writing this book, it could have set me backwards. She wouldn't have even known what she said.
Well, you know, she probably did. But I'll tell you, it was so well done. It was just so well done, Wendy, that it is going to have a major impact. You're going to have a major impact. And I really believe that God has called you to the kingdom for such a time as this.
Yeah, me
I
too.
really do. To lead and to influence. And I think our voices as women, you know, I talk a lot on voices and purpose, is so important. It is so important because I think there are messages that only we can take,
Yes.
that only we can take. You know, there are things that you are able to, places that where you're able to meet a person that the rest of us can say, you know, we have empathy and we have grace, but when you walk in and you've been in that place
Yeah.
to actually help a person move out. So yes, Ronaldo, we must give ourselves grace. I say that all the time. And the most difficult person to forgive is ourselves. Once done,
Oh,
but once done, Debbie Marklin says we are unstoppable.
Oh, very much. And Debbie Marklin's right. We are unstoppable. So women, we are unstoppable here. Men, you are too. But I just want to say, I'm just speaking to the women in this moment. You are unstoppable. So be kind to yourself, forgive yourself, and start today going forward. This is your future from today. And, you know, making that decision. What is the next step I have to take?
Wow.
What is my call to action from the one thing? You know, I say a journey of 1,000 steps begins with one. And oh my goodness, how true is that? It's what step can I take today that's going to bring about a change, even a little change, even a little change. My granddaughter and I have a joke. We have a favorite, one of my granddaughters, her name is Savannah. We have a favorite movie called A Dog's Way Home.
Yeah, I love it.
And he talks about a little piece of cheese that he feeds his dog, this tiny piece of cheese. And I often say to her, it's just a tiny little step, a tiny piece of cheese, and then you'll be able to move to the next step.
Wow.
So it is that tiny little step that we make that will make the difference. Because then we look back and we think, wow, you know, everything worthwhile is uphill, as we know.
Absolutely. And those steps add up. Those tiny little steps add up. And, you know, Wendy, it reminds me, you know, what John Maxwell says, some people can do nothing because they can only do a little.
Yeah.
And so we never want to be in a place where we do nothing because we can only do a little. Do the little you can do.
Yes.
Take it step by step, day by day. And like you said, Wendy, you'll look back and you're like, wow, look how far I've come.
Look how far I've come, right?
Look how far I've come, Wendy. Look how far I've come. It's like growth. It's like growth. You know, and that's the growth process. But I love the fact that you are talking about, because sometimes people experience trauma, Wendy. They feel that they're not useful. They're never going to be able to not lead themselves or anybody else. And they wonder, they stay a lot of times like in the historical piece of why, you know, why this happened to me? Why does this happen to me? If someone's there tonight, Wendy, and they're listening, how would you tell them to move from there by taking that next tiny step? What step is that?
You know, we ask ourselves that question, don't we? Is why did it happen to me? Bad things happen. You know, we don't understand, and bad things happen. That's life. Bad things happen. But what makes that bad thing worse is if you stay there and you ruminate and you chew over the bad thing that's happened. So if you're listening tonight and you're stuck in that bad place, just think of one thing. Maybe you've turned to drink, to alcohol, because that's your answer. So instead of the next glass of wine, have a glass of water, a cup of tea. One step, one difference. Maybe if it's your answer is the fridge, instead of the fridge, go for a walk around the yard. Think about the next step. In your journey as a leader, you know, what's the one thing that you can do to bring you out of that spot that you're in right now? It's one tiny step. And I want to just say that sometimes we take 2 or 3 steps up this hill and we might slide down 1 or 2 and then we think we're done. So we give up, but don't just get back up and go again. And I had to do that many times. I had to get back up and go again. Or we get so far and we think we're okay right now, but my goodness, you've got all of this up here. Don't give up. Just keep going. And I think it was Tom Telesco that said, and I know I've used it in my book as well, and I know I've heard him say it as well, you'll never see the glory of the other side until you reach the top of the mountain. So you never see the glory of what's available to until you reach the top. And so just keep climbing, one step after one step after one step. You know, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
One bite at a time. One bite at a time. And I can tell you that the one step at a time is so much better with God.
Oh, I couldn't do it without God. Yeah. I would be dead. I'm telling you now.
It is better with Him because He designed us really to take those steps with us. He designed us to take those steps with us. Is there anything else, Wendy, that you would like to share as we come to close, guys? I'm going to put Wendy's website on the screen because I want to share that with you, and I want you to go purchase the book. There are some other programs that she has that I think that you all will be interested in. Even if you have a church or whatever it is, you know, reach out to her. Wendy, tell them how they can reach you and how they can and what type of things you do.
Look, I speak. I speak at churches. I do women's ministry. I speak to organizations about self-leadership, team development. I coach. I love coaching. I love doing women's group. I run some little women's groups where we just have a few in each group so we can make them really personal to push through those bogus stories. So I love doing all of those things. So you can reach me through Wendy Burns Consulting or my Wendy Burns Consulting Facebook page. You can message me in any way. I'm sure that we'd be able to work something out so I can help you. But to share the message of hope, to know that there is a way forward, and very much in the church, because I sat in the church for a very long time and nobody knew. Nobody knew where I was at. And sadly, the church that I'm in at the moment, just over 12 months ago, I think it is now, somebody within our church committed suicide. Nobody knew where he was at. So don't think you're immune because you sit in a church. You're not. You're still at risk if you're dealing with the hidden baggage. And so be aware of your hidden baggage. And in the back of my book, I have essential items for travelers, the things that you need to take on your journey.
And listen, I want you to read those. There's 10 of them, I think.
Yes, there is.
I absolutely love that. Tell
So
me what it is, the title of it.
It's essential items for travelers. So you have to empty your baggage out, right, and repack. And if you're like me, when I travel, I put too much in, right? So empty it all out and start again. And I would love to see you add self-worth, because you are enough right now, no matter what. I want you to add hope, hanging on in patient expectation that you always have a choice to step into your potential. Faith, future answers in the hope. Trust in the bigger picture, even if you're not sure what it is. Energy, be prepared to play full out on this journey of discovery. Strength, because everything worthwhile is uphill, but the outlook is worth the challenges of the climb. So you need strength for the climb. And courage. It will not remove the obstacles, but it will show you how to forge a path that you believe in. Endurance. You will never see the glory of the other side, the outcome you desire, unless you endure the uphill climb. And future focus, very important. You must stop looking over your shoulder. You cannot walk forward while facing backwards. And forgiveness for those that have caused you harm, but especially for yourself. And curiosity. Stay open to possibilities and always be willing to learn and grow. The path will take you places that you do not expect. And number 11, faith. Hold on to your faith. Again, I'm throwing another one in. I had it as number 3, but faith. For me, if I hadn't have made the decision to truly have a true relationship with Jesus, I know I would be dead. I'm serious. I was going down the same road as my parents. The answer was suicide. The answer was to take my own life. And we know that's not the answer. We know that's not the answer. We've seen here in Australia this week, a man not only took his own life, but he took his 4-year-old son's life. When my father tried to kill us in that car, take our life as children, we could have easily have died. God has a bigger purpose for each one of us. Trust that he knows what is best. You're worth the journey. You are so worth the journey.
Woo. Now that, ladies and gentlemen, is Australia, but it's Wendy Burns. And I want to ask you this last thing, because it may be obvious, but I want to know how you got to the title Remarkable You.
Oh, God gave it to me. I have to say that I'll tell you, but you will think I'm strange. He told me that he had given me a gift to rebrand, help women rebrand who they were, and that was to be remarkable. And so he said, remarkable you. It was in one of my quiet times, one of my journals. It was just one of those things. And my designer that designed this cover, the amazing Nick Goodrich, a big shout out to him. He's been through my programs and he's been with me on my journey. And so the gold was really important, because gold, I used to go panning for gold with my dad, and we don't find the gold lying in a beautiful place. We find the gold amongst the grit and the grime and the rubbish in the rivers when you go panning for gold here in Australia. Our gold is amongst the grit and the grime and the rubbish. That's a remarkable you. And somebody said to me recently, that's really hard to find a remarkable you. And I said, no, it's not. It's there amongst the mess. You've just got to look for it.
Wow. And I know this, you will find what you look for.
Oh,
Oh my
absolutely.
gosh. Guy, I just you have so many messages of love on here, Wendy.
I'll have to go back and have a look.
It's been amazing. I can't believe the hour's over already,
I
but it
know.
was amazing. But we're gonna make our tour back, guys. I want you to go and get the book. I'm telling you, I read it. Wendy actually had sent me a PDF copy before she had released it, and then I got the book. And I'm telling you, I read it first time, and then I read it the second time, and I it enlarges you.
Oh, thank you.
It enlarges you as a person, as a human being. You cannot read it with all of its authenticity and not understand that everything that God made is golden. Wendy
Amen.
Burns, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being with us. I have enjoyed you tremendously. Happy birthday again.
Thank you.
Enjoy your birthday. And you're just looking younger and younger every time I see you. And that's
Uh,
the truth.
Thank you so much. And what a beautiful birthday gift to be able to be here with my friend Barbara Littles and share my story. So thank you, everybody, for
Thank
listening. And
you.
remember, you are remarkable.
All right. Thank you, everyone. See you next week.